Hi, I'm Yuvi, as she graciously introduced me. I work at the Berkeley. I work at UC Berkeley as infrastructure lead on the data science education program, but I'm also a volunteer at the Wikimedia project, where I'm a volunteer and I have root, and hence my name is on a list somewhere on the NSA. And I'm also a developer in the Jupyter project. So this talk has a somewhat grandiose title, so I'm going to try to rephrase that. The problem is that open data still takes too much effort and commitment to consume. There's like, here is like this big 60 gig zip file of XML that you have to go deal with. Here's like this stream that has some documentation, buried in like some basement behind like here's a cheetah warning. And we're like so this talk is pretty much an attempt at Wikimedia to try to fix this problem. I like doing dictionary definitions. So democratization, the dictionary definition says to make something available to all people. And right now, open data is great, but it is like a big stretch to say it's available to all people. It's available to all people who are able to understand like the problems of like processing really large amounts of data. And like going through and reading documentation. It's a fairly high bar. And so like this is the open data definition, and it says anyone. And I think like it's so far in a lot of places not really lived up to this promise. And so this is the Wikipedia dumps page. So if you go here, like this page is a lot longer. And this is just the first thing you see. And it's like, oh yeah, this is like split up into 107Z files. And if you spend a couple of weeks dealing with this, you might have an XML dump that you then have to use a streaming parser to read through to figure out stuff to do with content. Or you can like use the API, but then you have to deal with making a 5 million requests or however many requests you want to make. Or even for a small amount of requests, you still have to get your local environment set up, figure out the documentation, and deal with like back off and whatnot. So it's a complex problem. So before we dive into this, so what is Wikimedia? So obviously people know it's like, we run Wikipedia. We're not WikiLeaks. They just stole the name. They're not even a wiki. I have the domain. You're not even a wiki. You're not even a .wiki. And it just redirects to the WikiLeaks website. So Wikimedia, it was a revolution in how people created encyclopedias. So most people here probably just read it. And that's also great. Obviously, like, you don't have to wait for a salesman to come to your door before you can read an encyclopedia. But the really big deal there was it changed how people created it. It lowered the technical and social barriers for editing an encyclopedia. You no longer had to be like a professor somewhere or like a grad student somewhere to be able to edit it. It also meant there was no bylines, no first authors, no ownership, no like, oh yeah, we just got to wait till this article is good enough. And then you just get distracted and just never goes anywhere. People are like, you make a small increment edit now and then, and that's OK. And so that's like the radical editing and collaborative behavior. So that's just, you're like, I'm going to make a stub. Like, I have a town, and I'm going to say, this is a town here. And then you come back like 5 weeks later, and like it's like a 40-page article and like edited by some people from Germany, and you had no idea. And so that's why it was successful. It was basically like, yeah, everyone should be able to do this. So let's systematically work on lowering the social and technical barriers to making that happen. So I'm going to talk about some Wikimedia principles and also demo and talk about what a computational cluster would look like if it was built with these Wikimedia principles in mind. We all know what's a computational cluster, I guess. You SSH it to somewhere, and then you run Slurm. Or grid engine, and then you read through documents, and it runs your things. So that's what a traditional cluster is like, but this one is slightly different. And also, I want to point out that these are not like some written down principles of Wikimedia that came down from a mountain. These are just like things. So I've been in the Wikimedia community for like 6-7 years now, I think. And you just like absorb the things, absorb the principles that people seem to use to base editions on, that like drew you to the community, that keep you in there. And so these are just like decisions that I made while designing this cluster while we went on with that. So the first one is to be as open as possible. So anyone can sign up to this cluster. This cluster is called Pause for cuteness reasons, and we backgrounded it to something. I think it's called Pause, a web shell or something like that. So anyone can sign up. No approvals required. You just have a Wikipedia account, and then you can go sign up. Lowest possible barrier, so it's a free account. You don't actually have to do anything with it. But we do. So anti-abuse policy. So I think the previous talk was talking about like I don't trust you. You might be doing things to screw us up. We're like, yeah, but if you look at Wikipedia, right? Like this was similar. Like I'm not going to diss on Azure for their use case. That makes perfect sense. But if you look at Wikimedia and the culture it has, it's like, yeah, we'll be pretty open. We'll see what happens. And when stuff goes wrong, we'll like have ways to fix it. Note that I put a star there because I need to mention this does not mean you become Twitter and let Nazis use your platform. But it does mean that you don't be like, yeah, you need to, yeah, this is your user certificate. Like, don't put in too many technical barriers in place, and it's OK. It'll mostly work out. And these are the examples from Wikimedia. So I'm not even logged in, and I can already edit the article. Anonymous editing, like I think a large chunk of Wikipedia's edits actually still come from anonymous edits, but not everywhere. This article obviously gets a lot of vandalism, so you need to be a member of the community for a certain period of time before you can edit it. And this did not exist in the first time Wikipedia came up. It existed after like people are like, OK, I'm tired of cleaning up the same article over and over again. And then we're like, let's go implement this feature. So you just do this gradually. You don't try to guess what vandals will do, because you cannot do that. You just respond to it. So demo time. Let's try and do a demo. Interesting. This screen is full screen, and I don't know how to get away from being full screen. There we go. That's better. So this is the cluster. You go access it with a web URL. The URL is pause.wmflabs.org, paws.wmflabs.org. I'll put it up on screen. And it just says sign in with MediaWiki. Obviously, this is Wikipedia, so the design is kind of terrible. Plus, it's like a project that doesn't have too much time yet, but it's already made pretty good impact. So I'm just going to click sign in with Wikimedia, MediaWiki, and it's going to ask me for a bunch of rights. I'll show you why later, and I say fine, and it just takes me to a Jupyter notebook instance. So this is just JupyterHub. This is how I originally got involved in the Jupyter project. I was just like, oh yeah, we need to make this happen. And so then this just gave it to you. So I did not need to wait for any approvals. I was not like, this is like actually not even my real username. It's just like I made a test user called pause test user, and this just let me log in. Yes. It's paws.wmflabs.org. Yeah, so that's, and this is a normal Jupyter notebook that you can do a bunch of things with, and some more extra things. I'm going to go back to the slide now. There we go. This is confusing. Sorry about that. Right, and the second principle is to be as public as possible. Wikipedia on Wiki, there is like really no private spaces. You can't have like a profile page that you're like having a IM conversation with someone. All conversations are public from the start. There is like no like insider info. Like the only info we hide is like private IP addresses or like death threats, which happen a lot. Surprisingly large number of people have really strong opinions about encyclopedias. And permalinks should always refer to the same version of content. So if I like put a link in my publication or in like my Wikipedia page, that should always like continue to work. And then we have a process for dealing with like abuse, which is we ban them, and then we continue to ban them. And we have a community that polices itself, rather than like trying to have too many like measures which are like preemptive. So this also just goes into a demo, right? So this is like if you look at this, this is a permalink for a Barack Obama page. As it was when it was first created. This was what it was. When was it? It was on 18th March 2004, and someone created it with a comment that says half done. And it was actually created by someone who did not have a user account. So we have no idea who this person is. And this is public, so you can go see this. And of course, if you scroll through the history, you can see all the bad things that people have edited into this page as well, unless they're too bad. In this case, they're totally removed. And we're not like, oh no, this must be a thing of perfection. We will only show like after we've cleaned up our whole thing. It's just like there from the start. And this is actually one of our researchers. So he keeps a journal on Wiki. Just like basically like, as he's going through his day, doing random stuff, he just like keeps a note of it in his personal page. And people like, it's really good to both for himself in the future to go back and refer to this as like, what was I doing? why was I doing this? And because this is research about Wikipedia, on Wikipedia, that actually affects the things that happen on Wiki, it's an open and transparent process. So it's not like a research analyst goes away into a cave for a while and comes back and be like, yes, we have decided that this behavior causes problems, and so we will do this. It's like you can go back as an editor who disagrees with the decision and go through these logs and look at the research and be like, oh yeah, this is what we did. So this is the Wikimedia's like on wiki style of like, yeah, everything is going to be public. And now I'm going to show how that manifests in the cluster. So I'm going to create another notebook. And I'm going to say, hello, JupyterHub. And you can see that there's a button here that says public link. So if I click it, oh, I didn't save the notebook. I'm going to save the notebook. I'm going to click it again. So this notebook is public. So everything you create, even when it's blank, as you saw earlier, is public from the start. And you can, like this link, you can give it out to people, and they will be able to access it. We don't have a versioning mechanism for this yet. We are working on it. But right now, it's just like live. And you can just give this out link to someone, and they will be able to just like immediately use this and you can download the script version of it. You can download you can turn this into a slide share. So people have been at Wikimedia conferences using the slide functionality of Jupyter to make their slides, and then just like sharing it over with this, and that's been pretty good. So that's and this is like I feel like this is somewhat radical. I've been like hanging out. So I was at Wikimedia, and then I started hanging out in academic spaces where people seem to be a lot more protective of the stuff they do. So I feel like this is kind of a radical change in some forms. And I feel like in Wikimedia, this has actually been like, obviously in Wikimedia, people are used to this, right? Because they're used to like everything being public. And they've done really good stuff with this public nature of this that we'll get to in the next demo. Too many things, right. And the last thing is, again, attribution, not ownership. We don't have authorship, so you don't have like, this is my article, but we do have like, oh yeah, these are the list of people who have contributed various things to this article. And you have to provide attribution on Wiki before you can do things with it. But on the notebook platform, we've decided that the license should be something like CC0, because attribution gets kind of messy at that level. So Wikidata, for example, which is a really big like structured data platform, has CC0 as a license, so you don't actually have to attribute it because when you're combining and like changing code around, then it kind of gets really messy to actually figure out which one goes to attribute where. And the important thing is that this knowledge is created, and that is like you can actually go back to the source and look at all the people who contributed, rather than like saying I am using this person's this, and I am using this person's that, or these are the people who contributed to this in a much more visible way. And the last part is the defining use case for this, right? Which is we want to make it very easy and low friction to reuse each other's notebooks. And the way we have done this, which is also one of the reasons that the public stuff is really useful, is so in my notebook, I can do things like this. So if you look at this, I say from pause.yuvipanda.replica helper import SQL. So what this really is so I have a notebook under my user called replica helper.ipynb. And all I've done is I've like imported that notebook as a function into my other notebook. So I'm basically treating notebooks as importable modules, but across the whole system. So if you look at actually Wikipedia, they have templates, and they basically use it on Wikitext to do the same thing. So you can reuse each other's templates, and this is very, very similar. I'm actually going to show you a slightly better developed demo by just copy pasting some stuff. So I've imported that, and so the other thing we have here is you can run SQL against the live Wikipedia databases. You don't actually have to download and deal with the XML dumps itself. We provide a live read-only copy of the databases that's behind by a few seconds at most. And this is what a lot of people use. So this is just, and our database schemas and stuff are public. So this is just an SQL query that like I can say it used to find out like, how many edits I made. I have a thing here for more, which just uses, right, so this just is like an IPy widgets thing that lets me say, give me a list of users, and I'll tell you how many edits they made in the 10 years from 2006 to 2016. So if we were doing this with the XML dump, this is a really hard thing to do. I mean, obviously, once you have the XML dump parsed out and whatnot, but this time, I don't even have to figure out how to connect to the database. I just imported that function from another notebook, and I can just do this. So if I do this, right, it says I only have 864 edits. But you can run arbitrary queries here, and it works out well. And we've been doing this for like a long time. And of course, we've had security problems here, but there's enough isolation there that the security problems are like not actually that big a deal. And like the worst people can do is DDoS. And when they do DDoS, what we do is we ban them. And then when they do that again, we do it again. And that seems to mostly work out so far for like the last. I mean, that works on Wiki because people do bad stuff there all the time. And that's worked out on our technical infrastructure as well so far. So this is like really, I think, the really big component of this. I can show you the public. Oops. That. If anyone's considering moving back to Linux desktop, don't do it. See, this is like, OK, that's my URL bar. I'm trying to hit a URL. OK. I have no idea how to make this happen. I'm going to make a markdown cell and then click it. Yes! See, Linux makes you smarter. So this is the original notebook. So these notebooks are just notebooks. So for a lot of the people who use these, they don't consider themselves programmers. They're just like, oh yeah, I just want to find out. They're just an editor, maybe in a war with another editor. And they just have to like find some facts to support the conclusions they've already come to. So they use this, and they're like, oh yeah, I want to run this query. And then they already have lots of other public examples of notebooks on this platform that are linked to from like various communities. Like we found out like there's like a bunch of notebooks with Arabic stuff in them, and I have no idea what they do or say. And they're like all over the Arabic Wikipedia community. Same with the Tamil Wikipedia community, except I do know what they say. So this is, the people go and read this and like, okay, some of this makes sense. And then like mostly what they do is they copy paste. We are looking at like adding forking functionality properly to this. We have another thing called Query, which just lets you run SQL, doesn't let you do anything else. And that's very popular, and that has like 10,000, 15,000 queries run on it every month. And most of the people there, when you talk to them, they don't consider them the programmers. I'm like, I just click fork, and then I change the words that I do understand, because this query is looking at this page. I want it to look at this page. So I'm just going to change that and then make it work. And that's what most of them do with the notebooks as well. And it's worked out pretty well. I'll share some stats later on. So let's see. There we go. No. Yes. Right, so that's the third demo. And I want to reiterate what we just showed, because I think that's really the core part of going back to what the title means, which is like before that, if you wanted to find out how many edits I had in 10 years, it's a week-long process. Lots of data, lots of work. And this time, I could just hit the SQL database directly. And we could do this because we have our open data, but we are also providing open compute on the same place. That makes it very easy for us to actually do this, and it makes it very easy for the users to go up and like build this. And it's also like public, so they can just do that. I like putting Karl Marx quotes in my presentation. I've never read him. It just like pisses some people off. And this is the last part of the demo, which is so bots. So Wikipedia has a large history of bots. Stuart Geiger, who gave a talk earlier and who's not here right now, He's like the historian of bots on Wikipedia, and he has like done a lot of really good papers on it. But bots make up like 30 to 40%, I think, depending on what day you look at, of all edits to Wiki. And they do a majority of the vandal fighting on Wiki. So if you write something that's like obviously troll, it will be reverted within minutes by one of the many number of bots that are being written. So these bots are often not written by people who consider themselves programmers at all. And it shows if you look at the code. But that's OK, because they don't have to be, right? Like the way I think of it is like programming is you're telling the computer what to do. And all you really need to know is what do you want to tell it? And that's often like the hard part of programming is like, what do I build? How do we build this rather than the actual parts? So these people who don't consider themselves software engineers but still are like making millions of edits, right? Like these bots are responsible for millions of edits. They've added so much value to Wikipedia over the years. I think one of Stuart's papers found that when one of the bots was down, vandalism remained on Wikipedia for up to like 70% longer than when it was not. And lots of them were just not caught until someone else made an edit later on, and when someone else was looking at it, they're like, wait, that other thing doesn't look right. So bots are a very important part of this, and we wanted to make sure that that was very well supported here. And so before all of this, we also had a traditional, I wouldn't call it HPC, it was not very high performance, but we had a computational cluster, which was grid engine based. It also had access to the MySQL database, and it was also open to everyone, but you had to wait for like a day because that's a ritual apparently you have to complete. And then requires code running on it to be open source because we're giving it to you for free, so you don't want us to run like random unrelated code there. You can run Wikimedia related code there. And this has about 1,000 users, and it is like about 9 years old now. So the MySQL stuff is not something we did just for this cluster. It's been like there for a while before that, and so it's had all of its security issues before we came in. But these are the number of steps you need to do to actually run a simple SQL query on this. And this is like not I don't think this is an exhaustive list. And if you want to run a bot, this is the list, right? And the red thing is the only thing you actually care about, which is to run the bot. And then the rest of that is just like fluff, like it's accidental complexity that is there by dint of like computational decisions made in the 80s that still persist with us to this day. But now with pause, this is it. So we've had 1.6 million edits done to mostly Wikidata, but also other Wikipedia projects from bots written on this. I have a short GIF. This is now part of the official doc. So if you go and like find out how to write a bot, like first step is like, yeah, you can just run it on pause. So you can just click through, and they have docs on like just log into this JupyterHub, and then just you can go do your thing. And if you look at how they do it, most of the people just do something like this. They don't actually get into a notebook at all. They use it as a terminal. We have given workshops in like, and this is especially useful for, so Wikipedia exists in like 280 languages, many of which are like propped up by like a small community of enthusiasts. So I have experience with the Tamil Wikipedia community. We actually went there to give them a technical workshop. So they had one person who was technical enough to run bots. And bots are very important for all projects because, for example, if you just want to correct a typo across your entire project, you need to write a bot. And so that meant that if your community had one bot person, then they were always swamped with these kind of small tasks that they would be kind of boring to do because it's like pretty simple stuff. But they can't actually ask the actual editors to do it because then you're like, oh yeah, download and install Python and configure this and learn how to use a text editor. Like we had before this, when you do this, we would have to explain to people the difference between a text editor and Word. And that's kind of difficult to do. So lots of people, what they do is they just like log in, they use the terminal. So if you remember when we logged in the beginning, it actually asked for a bunch of OAuth scopes. So we actually put all of that in. So you don't actually have to deal with getting your password in there. It's all set up. And then there is really good documentation in many languages. If we actually look at one of these things. No, I don't have it. The bot documentation is actually, I think, in at least 8 languages. And I only wrote it in English. People just translate this, and it just kind of happens. And it's been heavily used by a lot of people. Tamil Wikipedia has like hundreds of edits done from this bot. And these are people who often don't even speak English. All they know is like, they go to their documentation, and it says in their language, oh, if you want to do this, copy paste this thing and change these things, and you can do it. And then they do it, and it's great. It's really fun to see. And like I've seen like people in the workshops do this even without, like, they don't have a laptop. They just do it on their phones. Like they just don't own a computer. It's just like completely on their phones. And they're like typing multi-byte. Like it's actually easier to type like local languages on your phone than in many laptops, surprisingly. And they do edits from here. It's crazy. I mean, some of the creation is just like Wikimedia is crazy, so some of it touches on. But it's also really fun and rewarding to see all of this happen. I'm going to do a short demo of this if I can go to the correct tab. Yay! So this is why the terminal is very, very important. Like I find that lots of people don't actually use it. But this is like the terminal is probably the biggest thing that's used in this particular platform. And it just completely replaces SSH. Like SSH is like cool, but it's also really painful. And if you're on Windows, it's even more painful. And well, it's Windows XP, which is what all of these people are on. We have to get them to get on Chrome. So this is like definitely a much better experience than most of that. So I can just do, obviously, it gives you a bunch of boilerplate, and we have a lot of stuff installed and configured. So you don't actually have to log in. Like I already logged in, right? I don't have to, if you were running this on your home computer, you actually have to deal with getting an OAuth provider, OAuth client token, which on Wikimedia for some reason requires approval. So wait for that, try to set up OAuth on your computer and do with it. And now you just like do like pwd.py, log in, and okay. All right, because this is a test account that I set up. You need to visit the Wikipedia you're trying to edit at least once before you can log in. Oh yeah, right. That's not the Linux. Why are my keys not working? I'm typing things. I don't understand what's going on. Well, okay. I do want this to work. I'm using Linux. I must be smart. I should figure this out. I know, right? All of those would be a much smarter idea than GNOME 3 on Ubuntu 17.04. Don't do it. It's a trap. I'm going to go out of this and then try this is just crazy. Okay. Ooh, maybe I can do that from, no, I can't do that from here. Okay, I'm going to go search for test wikis here and click the link. Yes. Okay. Okay. There we go. Live demos. All right. If this doesn't work, I'll give up. Yeah. There we go. I'm logged in now. Woo! Yeah, and I can like make edits. That is like I can do pw.py replace. Right. So then it just guides me through this. I'm not actually going to do this now because I don't want to actually make edits. But I can be like, replace all hellos with hi. And I can now press enter, and it'll actually go and do this, which I'm not going to do. But yeah, so this is much simpler than the actual local install process, and that's really like the big win there for people who don't actually know what notebooks are, who don't, oh, this is how I can exit full screen. Cool. Okay. All right. Cool. So that's it. And this is like a very simple version. There's obviously lots of low-hanging fruit here. We need to add publishing. We have decent ideas on how to do that. We'll probably maybe publish into MediaWiki, which does its own versioning. We already have, like, if you remember the import hook, we already have a version of it that picks up from, say, GitHub. So you can import a notebook directly from GitHub into your thing. Arbitrary code execution. And you can do things like that from MediaWiki as well. We are also, like, cron jobs are like the biggest. Like, there is now at least 3 people I know who log into the system every Sunday and then run a bot. manually. They're just manually cron jobbing. And so what we are in the process of developing is we want to have a notebook extension where we can basically just say, run this every week or run this every day. And the system would figure out how to do that properly. So they don't actually have to understand cron tabs and whatnot. Just like going with the theme of this is how a cluster that Wikimedians would want to use is built on top of. Forking stuff, yeah, we definitely want to do that. Other data sources that are not just Wikipedia, we want to have OSM data in there and maybe other public data sets. And just also deploying web services. Like you can create a web service in the notebook, and then we want to be able to deploy that to a URL. And so you can give that out to people. So all you need is okay, I'm just going to make some IPy widgets here, which are fairly easy to make, and then you can just publish that. And when we want to actually be able to run that at some amount of scale without the users actually having to do anything special. And these are all things that we're randomly working on. And so the point of this is that this is now a thing you can do. This is fairly easy to set up. This is just the 0 to JupyterHub guide. We were just following it. And it has really good properties. These are I did not know until 2 weeks ago that 1.6 million edits have been made to Wikidata from this platform. I'm just oh yeah, I made this to make bots easier. And then apparently it made it very easy. And there were also, when we started doing this, people were concerned. So well, if you made bots easier, wouldn't people write vandalism bots that just destroy Wikipedia? We're well, we'll see, because people have been worried about lots of things destroying Wikipedia in the past, and they've so far been okay. And it hasn't destroyed Wikipedia. So this more people should do this. As far as I know, Wikipedia is the only thing that has an open JupyterHub that people can log on to and do stuff with. And I think if you have an open data platform, or if you have an open if you're publishing a bunch of open data, please consider running a JupyterHub on it with even some resources. You would be surprised at what the cool kind of stuff that people can do with it, because these people are crazy and they would do tons of stuff with the same thing. And also, if you have an analytics platform inside your organization, I think a lot of enterprises are already doing this, where they basically set up a JupyterHub that connects to their data sources for their analysts to do stuff easily. So you probably already know this, and I don't have to tell you that. 0 to JupyterHub is the guide that we've been that you've probably been sick of hearing during this conference. But that's the guide. That guide originally came out of. So Wikimedia is how I got involved, and the Wikimedia installation eventually became the Berkeley installation, and then the 0 to JupyterHub guide came out of the Berkeley installation. So this is some of the original stuff. And you can also play with all the Wikimedia data at pos.wmflabs.org. The URL is finally there. And just make public notebooks and give us features and try to break it, right? We do have probably lots of vulnerabilities that we need to. We've done some effort, but it's mostly just figuring out, what is the real problems versus what are just perceived problems. That's it. Thank you. All of the code for this, which is just the configuration of 0 to JupyterHub, is public at the GitHub URL, and you can also go and check this project out and make a free account and fiddle with it and tell us what the bugs are. Thank you. Yes, questions?
I don't know if it's a question or more like a statement, but it seems like part of the takeaway here is if you make writing code basically as easy as editing Wikipedia, just like you made it easy for people to write down knowledge, you can make it easy for them to create new knowledge based on their data, and also make agents, right, through bots. And then the kind of importing mechanism is interesting because then you can almost emerge in coding data where people don't really know how to program. Other people kind of do make pieces for them, and they kind of bubble that up, and then people they kind of build their own usable abstraction.
Yep.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. That's a succinct summarization of my talk that I wish I had actually said myself. So, yeah.
It's really awesome. Really good work.
Thank you. Yes?
So you mentioned earlier on the talk attribution.
Yeah.
Do you allow anyone to edit an IPy?
No, right now they have to download it into their thing and then change it. But we do want to do that. Lots of people actually want to be able to just edit other people's stuff, but we don't have a, MediaWiki pages live in a database, so we can do that easily. But I'm sure you know the problems of doing this. So, Right. So on MediaWiki as well, we do not allow simultaneous edits. If you do that, we'll try some auto merging, but if it fails, it just pops up back to you, and we expect people to do quick shot edits. And that's something that we eventually do want to make here, but it's just not there yet. But I think forking will get us to mostly where people want it to be, and that's the next big thing that we have to implement. Yes.
I noticed that you have what was the live URL.
Yeah.
Button. You also have a Jupyter Lab open on the JupyterHub, and it doesn't have such a button.
I made that extension this morning.
Oh, really? Okay.
Before that, people had to manually edit the URL to get the new public link, which they did. So yeah, I should write a Jupyter Lab extension. The other thing about this is it's also fully set up to have CI and automatic deploys and automatic builds. So if you're interested in looking at how to do CI, I just do a git push and then it automatically builds and deploys it without too much downtime. So if you want to look at that, you can also look at that on that GitHub URL. Yes. You can, so we've been trying to get all of the notebooks that people have been producing into Elasticsearch so that you can actually query and discover notebooks, because that's really the biggest problem right now is oh yeah, there's notebooks, but you only find them when people talk about it on Wiki in a place that you're looking for. But we really, Elasticsearch is the thing after forking, because without discovery, discovery definitely enables a lot more of this than without it. All right. Thank you very much for coming to this talk, even though it's not about Berkeley.